The first time I saw the oak tree, I was 12 years old. My father had just bought the land, a wide, sweeping parcel on the edge of town that sloped gently down into the valley. At the very center of that land stood the oak, towering like a sentry, its branches sprawling as though they were the arms of some ancient guardian. My father told me it was older than the town itself, older than the very state lines, maybe. People called it the widow's oak, though no one could tell me why. As a boy, I would sit beneath it with a book or lie on my back staring at the sky as the leaves danced above me. That oak was more than a tree. It was a piece of permanence in a world that kept changing. My father used to say, "Son, this tree has seen more history than we'll ever live. Protect it." When he passed, that promise became mine alone. Years later, when I inherited the property, the suburbs had crept closer. The developers had brought with them neat rows of homes, cul-de-sacs, and an HOA that fancied itself judge and jury over everything within its borders. The land my father left me sat at the edge of this carefully manicured empire, and the oak, proud and sprawling, became a point of contention. The HOA's president was a woman named Karen, though fate couldn't have gifted her a more fitting name. She had sharp features, a voice like nails on glass, and an unshakable belief that rules existed solely for her to enforce. From the first day she saw me trimming the hedges by my fence line, she walked over in her pristine tennis outfit, clipboard in hand. "You know," she said, eyeing the oak as if it were a weed, "that tree of yours casts quite the shadow over Mrs. Allen's lawn, and the leaves, well, they blow everywhere. We may have to address that at the next meeting." I laughed lightly, not realizing the seriousness of her threat. "Ma'am, that tree's been here longer than any of us. It's not going anywhere." Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "We'll see about that." At first, I ignored her. Neighbors had warned me, "Karen finds a problem with everyone. One month it's the color of your shutters, the next it's how often you mow your lawn." I figured she'd move on, but she didn't. She came back with letters. "Notice of violation," they read, stamped with the HOA's seal. "Overgrown vegetation affecting community harmony. Potential hazard due to falling branches. Failure to maintain landscaping standards." Each notice was more absurd than the last. I filed them away thinking common sense would prevail. But then came the ultimatum. "You are hereby instructed to remove the oak tree located on your property within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in fines of $500 per week until removal is completed." I nearly tore the paper in half from rage. Remove the oak? The oak my father had told me to protect? The oak that had stood for centuries, weathering storms and droughts? It wasn't just outrageous, it was personal. That night, I sat beneath its branches, running my hands along the rough bark. I whispered aloud like I used to as a boy. "They want you gone, old friend, but I won't let them." I decided to fight. I researched property rights, combed through the HOA bylaws, and spoke with neighbors who sympathized but feared Karen's wrath. Then, in the dusty archives of the county office, I struck gold. The oak was not just any tree. It had been listed years ago under the State Heritage Tree Program, a designation reserved for trees of exceptional historical, cultural, or ecological significance. That oak was protected by law. Cutting it down wasn't just against the rules, it was illegal. Armed with this knowledge, I drafted a polite but firm response to the HOA. I enclosed documents proving the oak's heritage status. "As such," I wrote, "this tree cannot be removed, trimmed, or otherwise harmed without express approval from the State Department of Conservation. Any attempt to force such removal would be unlawful." I sent the letter by certified mail, certain that the matter was closed. But Karen wasn't just stubborn. She was relentless.
2 weeks later, I woke to the growl of chainsaws. Rushing outside, I found 2 contractors standing at the base of the oak, ropes slung over their shoulders. My blood boiled.
"What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted. One of the men shrugged. "We were hired by the HOA. Said this tree needs to come down." I stepped between them and the trunk. "Touch this tree, and you'll be breaking state law. You'll lose your licenses, maybe worse." They hesitated, exchanged looks, and wisely packed up. Karen arrived minutes later, storming down the sidewalk, shrill and furious. "You can't interfere with HOA directives," she snapped. "You can't order something illegal," I shot back. I held up the state documents like a sword. "This tree is protected. Try again, and the fines won't be mine, they'll be yours." For the first time, she faltered, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "We'll see what the board says." What followed was a war of attrition. The HOA fined me weekly, though I refused to pay. They plastered my name in newsletters, calling me a non-compliant homeowner. Karen rallied a few like-minded neighbors, spreading rumors that the oak was diseased, that it endangered children, that it lowered property values. But I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Word of the heritage designation spread. Local environmental groups took interest. A historical society offered support. And when a journalist caught wind of the dispute, the story exploded across social media. HOA targets 200-year-old heritage oak. Suddenly, the battle was bigger than my yard. It was about community versus control, heritage versus arrogance. Strangers sent letters of support. College students showed up to take photos under the tree. Children played at its base, parents teaching them the value of history. Karen's fury only grew. She doubled down, pushing for legal action. At the next HOA meeting, she stood before the gathered residents and announced, "This tree is a danger to our community, and anyone siding with it is siding against safety." I stood too, calm but unyielding. This tree is the soul of this land. It's not a danger, it's a protector. And the only danger here is people who think power gives them the right to erase history. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. For the first time, the board seemed uncertain. Karen's iron grip was slipping, but she wasn't done, not by a long shot. She filed a lawsuit against me. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a petty squabble. It was war. And in war, you don't just defend, you strike back. The lawsuit arrived in a thick envelope stamped with the HOA's seal, as if the weight of the paper could intimidate me into surrender. Inside, Karen's demands were clear: immediate removal of the oak tree, payment of accrued fines, and compensation for alleged damages to the community. Reading it, I almost laughed. She was trying to bulldoze the law with paperwork. But I wasn't alone anymore. The environmental group that had rallied to my side connected me with an attorney named Daniel Flores, a sharp, battle-tested litigator who specialized in land and environmental law. When I showed him the documents, his eyes lit up. "She just stepped into the biggest trap of her life," he said, tapping the heritage tree certificate. "Not only does the state protect this tree, but anyone who attempts to remove it faces criminal penalties. She's not just overreaching, she's incriminating herself." For weeks, the case wound through motions and filings. Karen strutted around the neighborhood like a queen preparing for coronation, telling anyone who would listen that the oak would be gone within the month. She even had the arrogance to mock me directly. "You might think you're clever with your little papers," she said one afternoon as I collected my mail, "but the board backs me, the community backs me. You can't stop progress." "Progress?" I said, stepping closer so she couldn't ignore me. "You call destroying a 200-year-old tree progress? You're not protecting the community, Karen. You're feeding your ego." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "When that tree's gone, you'll see I was right." What she didn't realize was that every boast she made, every word she spread around the neighborhood was being noted and documented. Daniel was meticulous. He gathered affidavits from neighbors who overheard her threats, compiled articles that showed how she misled the community, and most importantly, secured a statement from the State Department of Conservation affirming the tree's protected status.
The court date arrived on a crisp autumn morning. I wore my father's old tie, the one he had worn to his last town council meeting years before, as a quiet promise that I'd see this through. Karen strutted into the courthouse in a bright red suit, dragging 2 HOA board members behind her like lackeys. She smirked at me as if victory were already hers. When the case was called, Karen's lawyer began with a sweeping statement about community safety and the rights of homeowners associations to maintain harmony. He painted the oak as a threat, diseased, unstable, and dangerous. He even claimed a child had nearly been injured by falling acorns, a lie so absurd it drew laughter from the gallery. Then Daniel stood, calm, precise, and devastating. He laid out the state law, the heritage designation, and the penalties for tampering with protected trees. He presented photographs showing the oak's health, letters from arborists declaring its sound, and news clippings about its cultural significance. Finally, he dropped the bombshell. Karen's attempts to hire contractors to cut it down, a direct violation of state law. "Your Honor," Daniel said, holding up the certified state document, "the defendant's tree is not just his property. It is a heritage monument, safeguarded by this state. The plaintiff's actions are not merely misguided, they are unlawful. This court should not only dismiss their frivolous claims, but consider sanctions for their reckless and malicious conduct." The judge leaned forward, brows raised. "Protected by the state, you say?" Daniel handed over the paperwork. The judge scanned it, then looked directly at Karen. "Did you know this tree was protected under state law?" Karen stammered, her confidence cracking for the first time. "Well, I was told—" "By whom?" the judge pressed. She sputtered, glancing at her lawyer, who suddenly seemed very interested in his shoes. The room was silent, except for the judge's gavel as he spoke. "Case dismissed with prejudice. All fines levied against the defendant are void. Furthermore, I am ordering the HOA to reimburse the defendant for his legal costs. And Miss Thompson," he paused, addressing Karen by her full name, "I suggest you familiarize yourself with state law before making demands that could cost you far more than embarrassment." The gavel fell, and with it, Karen's empire of arrogance. But the revenge didn't stop there. The story of the courtroom victory spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up. HOA president humiliated after trying to destroy heritage oak. The comments online were merciless. Neighbors who had once feared Karen now laughed openly at her. Her power on the board disintegrated as members resigned, unwilling to be associated with her scandal. Within months, a vote was held, and she was removed as president. As for the oak, it became more than a tree. It became a symbol. The Historical Society erected a small plaque at its base, telling of its age and protection. Local schools began bringing children on field trips to see it, teaching them about the importance of conservation and heritage. On weekends, families gathered beneath its shade, as though reclaiming it from the shadow of bureaucracy. Karen, meanwhile, sulked in her house, curtains drawn tight, her once booming voice reduced to whispers behind glass. Neighbors who once trembled at her letters now ignored her entirely. Some said she put her house on the market, unable to stand the humiliation. Others whispered she stayed but never showed her face again, a ghost haunting the cul-de-sac she once ruled. And me? I kept my promise to my father. The oak still stands, its branches reaching high, its leaves whispering in the wind like a choir of victory. Every time I walk beneath it, I feel the weight of what we fought for. Not just a tree, but the idea that history,
heritage, and principle can withstand even the loudest, pettiest voices of arrogance. Sometimes in the evening light, I sit on the old bench my father built under its shade. I watch his neighbors stroll by, children laughing, people smiling, and I think about Karen's words. When that tree's gone, you'll see I was right. But the tree isn't gone. It's stronger than ever. And every soul who passes beneath it knows exactly who was right, and who was nothing more than a bitter memory. The widow's oak remains timeless and untouchable, a testament to patience, justice, and the sweet, satisfying sting of revenge.